Hey guys, guess what? I just made a new episode while I was outside walking. It was such a good time. Unfortunately, the beginning was a little bit noisy because the wind was intense in the beginning. So I just want to make a short new introduction. I hope you enjoy it. Maybe I will make more episodes like this later. Enjoy! If the quality is really bad, then I might not publish this. But if it's okay, if the quality is okay, then I might make episodes like this from time to time. Maybe I'll just call them episode on the go so that you're aware that it might not be great quality. But if you hear me okay, I think that's the most important thing. Because the reason why I make this podcast is so that is for you to be able to learn when you are on the go. And I thought to myself, why not make them on the go as well? And we can both get a little bit more movement in our lives, right? Anyways, today's topic is past tense in Norwegian. And I'm going to use English as my reference and show you how it differs from English. And what I will talk about is two tenses that we call Preteritum and perfektum. And I'm going to be a little bit more precise because perfektum is not the full name. Perfektum, there are two types of perfektum. You have presens perfektum, which is the first tense you learn and which is the one you use most of the time. And then we have one which is called Preteritum perfektum. So an example, presens perfektum would be, for instance, har spist, has eaten. And Preteritum perfektum would be hadde spist, had eaten. So basically, with presens perfektum, you have har in present tense, presens, present tense, and then preteritum perfektum is with hadde, which is in preteritum, had. So when you get the first one right, the last one with hadde should not be too complicated to understand. But first of all, we need to understand the main differences between these two tenses. So preteritum, for instance, spiste, ate, and presens perfektum, har spist, has eaten. Not all of you have English as your mother tongue, and Norwegian conjugation follows more or less the same logic as in English, so it's good to use it as a reference point. But we do not, so there are two things that differ. First thing is that we are a little bit stricter about how to use the two tenses, so how to distinguish when to use each of them. The way we differentiate different kinds of pasts, or the way we see the past, let's say it that way. The way we see the past is follows English in many ways, but we do not have as many tenses, or we do not talk about the past in as many ways as in English. So it's much easier. But not all of you have English as a mother tongue. So even though we compare with English, that doesn't mean that all of you really understand how to conjugate in English. And also in Norwegian, we're a little bit stricter about how we talk about the past. So let's first I'm just going to tell you what the two conjugations can translate to in English. Okay, just to show you that one translation can be translated in many ways in English, and why it is so. So, for instance, when I say jeg spiste. That can translate to I ate. It can translate to I was eating. It can translate to I did eat. Yeah, so those three. And when I say jeg har spist, that can translate to I have eaten, which is the more straightforward translation, which is quite obvious. Jeg har, I have spist, eaten. But also, I have been eating. Yeah, I guess that's it. Have you eaten? Yeah, that's those two. So let's look at my first example with preteritum. Jeg spiste. I ate. But jeg spiste can also mean I was eating. And what does that actually mean? I think it's called the past continuous past in English, which basically means that in English you differentiate between something that was a habit that happened generally, like I ate pizza every Friday, for instance. Jeg spiste pizza hver fredag. Actually, in Norway it's tacos, but anyways. And when you got home, I was eating pizza. Da du kom hjem, spiste jeg pizza. You see, that's something that happened while something else was happening, right? So it was something that was actually ongoing at a certain moment. We do not differentiate between those two. Whether it happened in general or it happened at a specific point, we would, in both examples, we would use spiste. So, preteritum. So we do not differentiate those two. We do not differentiate between things that happened for a longer period of time and shorter period of time. I know there are some languages that do that. In Latin languages, I think it's quite common. We do not differentiate. So whether it's a short activity or a longer one, doesn't matter. The choice of past tense does not depend on how long that activity was and whether it happened while something else was going on or not. Okay? I'll come back to how we differentiate the past tenses later. First, we'll translate, and then I'll talk a little bit about the theory behind our use. In English, you would also, like for instance, in questions, sometimes you use did and then infinitive. Like for instance, did you eat? Spiste du? So even though it is a question, we will still use just spiste, nothing else. Now in English, this has a function that I just got aware of. I didn't think about that, but so did is always followed by the subject in English. And in some questions, your question word is actually the subject. And in that case, you do not use did. So for instance, if I say, what did you eat, right? You are the subject. You ate something. Whereas if I say, what ate you, then it means like which thing ate you. So which thing was the subject that ate you, the object? In English, in Norwegian, well, that's a very it's a very strange sentence, and normally in Norwegian you in both cases you would say hva spiste. Well, you would say hva spiste du? What did you eat? And if it was what ate you, it would be hva spiste deg? What ate you, right? So it would be understandable in this case. And there are a few cases where that it could be difficult to understand who did what, who was the person doing the action and who was the one receiving the action. But in most cases, it's very understandable. So we never ask a question with did by adding did and then the main verb. We just use the main verb in past tense directly. So, yeah, so did eat is the equivalent of spiste, and ate, spiste. as well. Was eating, spiste. Okay, now over to presens perfektum. Jeg har spist pizza hver fredag I år. I have been eating pizza every Friday this year. Jeg ikke sulten, jeg har spist pizza. I'm not hungry, I have eaten pizza. So the difference here would be that the first one would be something ongoing, and the other one talking about a specific event. Now let's talk about the difference between these two concepts and how the use differs a little bit from how English differentiate these times. So we can start with preteritum. When we use preteritum, our goal is to relive the past. When you're telling a story, when you're talking about your weekend, or when you're talking about when you lived in this or that country, or you traveled somewhere, you will use preteritum. We're rediscovering the past. And we do not necessarily tell in every sentence when this happened, but we do have a time reference, more or less precise. You are, maybe in your first sentence you will say, last week I did this and this and this, and then I did this and then I did this. You don't have to state that in every sentence that it was last week, because we get it. We already have that information. So one of the rules you learn for Norwegian is that when you have the information for when it happened, you need to use preteritum, which is true. But even when you don't have the time, you still might need to use preteritum, because we know when it happened. We are reliving the past. We're trying to imagine how it was. Sometimes it's not very clear exactly when it was. Sometimes the only statement you need is før, before. Før is very vague, right? That can be any time. So with words like før, you are, like you can choose both. You can use preteritum, but you can also use perfektum. It depends what your focus is. So that is very important. When you choose which one to use, your focus should be your focus. So preteritum, you're reliving the past. When it happened is important, and we do not necessarily care about what that means now. You just want to tell a fun story and get the other person to imagine how that was at that specific time. That is your focus. Now, when you use perfektum, both of them, but we're going to start with presens perfektum, har spist, for instance, you are more focused on the present. That is why it's called presens perfektum, and that is why we we a helping verb in present tense, har. That's your helping verb. So there are two scenarios here, or we can say there are three scenarios. One is you don't know when it happened. You just know that it has happened. Your focus then is not on when it happened, because you don't know when it happened, but you can see that it has happened, right? And that is your focus. So you're focusing on the result of that action right now. So if you enter the door and you see there's no pizza, then, well, you know what has happened, right? But you don't know when it happened. Noen har spist pizzaen min. Somebody has eaten my pizza. You're not reliving the past. You don't care about how that felt for that person who ate your pizza. What you care about is what that means for you right now. You have no pizza. So that is what you're dealing with. You are living in the moment, and you are wondering who has eaten your pizza. Where is your pizza right now? Okay, so that's one thing. You don't know when it happened, and you don't really care because the pizza's gone. And then you have another case where you do know when it happened, but it's not important because you care about what that means for you right now. So imagine somebody asks you, vill du gå på kino og se Spider-Man? Do you want to go to the movies and watch Spider-Man? And you answer, jeg har sett den allerede. I have seen it already. You know when you watched it. Maybe it was 2 years ago, maybe it was 1 week ago. Doesn't matter. You're not trying to relive the past. You can, of course, do that and talk about how that experience was. Then you're reliving the past and you would use preteritum. But your focus is on what does that mean for today, right now? And that could mean different things depending on the context. So if you say, jeg har sett den allerede, that might mean, no, I don't want to see it again right now. Or, no, I didn't like it, so I'm definitely not going to watch it again. Or maybe it means I want to watch another movie, right? So it means that you've seen it, so this experience is important for right now. It determines what your choice is going to be. Are you going to watch the movie or not? Okay, so focus is on what does this mean for my choice? And then we have a different kind of use of presens perfektum, which is when you're talking about something that is still going on, or at least until this very moment. It might end right now, in 1 second, but up until now it has been true. And in English you do the same thing. You use similar tense to presens perfektum. So you would, for instance, you can say, jeg har bodd I Norge I 3 år. Jeg har bodd I Norge I 3 år. I have been living in Norway for 3 years. I'm actually not sure if you say I have been living or I have lived in Norway. I guess you would say I have been living in Norway for 3 years. So, because it's something ongoing, right? So, yeah, that would probably be the most logic one. We still do not differentiate those two. The context makes sense. If you've lived in a country for 3 years, it is something that matters. It's not just some random thing that happened, right? Especially if you mention how long it took, how long it lasted. You would never use presens perfektum if that was still not the case. If it was in the past, I would use preteritum, even though I'm not mentioning exactly when, because the other person can have an idea by the context when it happened. So you see, the rule that you use preteritum when we know when it happened is not so good, because we very often use it even though we're not saying exactly when it happened. So if somebody says to you, jeg har bodd I Norge I 3 år, well, first of all, you would know if they're still living there, probably, since you are in Norway. And the thing is here, why do we use presens perfektum? Well, we are focusing on the present. We are in the present. So it's something that started in the past and that is still ongoing, still happening. And very often we use that to say, like, what kind of experience we have. What does that mean for us right now? Right? For instance, if I say, jeg har jobbet I 5 timer nå. I've been working for 5 hours now. What does that mean? Am I reliving the past? No. I'm telling now I'm tired. Right? So we're still focusing on now. What does this mean for me now? So yeah, that are the differences between when to use presens perfektum and when to use preteritum. But then we also have something called Preteritum perfektum. Preteritum perfektum. Super fancy name. For instance, jeg hadde spist. Jeg hadde spist da du kom hjem. I had eaten when you came home. Preteritum perfektum is used in sentences together with preteritum. Because when you use preteritum perfektum, your reference point is the past. Whereas when you use presens perfektum, your reference point is the present. So basically, if you are telling a story, right, and then you want to talk about something that happened before that time in the past, or that had already happened before that time, then you can use preteritum perfektum. So for instance, in my case, jeg hadde spist da du kom hjem. I had eaten when you came home, right? So you came home, that's past, and then the eating part happened before that again. It had already happened. It was already done, basically, before. That's it. That's the logic. So now you know the difference. And I know that very often in English you use something similar to preteritum, where Norwegians would definitely not use preteritum. We would use presens perfektum. Like, for instance, maybe you could say, how was your day? It's not wrong to say that in Norwegian, but very often we would rather say, Hvordan har dagen din vært? How has your day been? Because unless we're very late in the evening, the day is not over yet, right? So you cannot talk about something that is still ongoing as if it was in the past. Preteritum is only used for something that is over. So imagine we're Wednesday, right? The week is not over. So I could not ask, Hvordan var uka di? The week is not over. I would have to say, Hvordan har uka di vært? How has your week been? But if it's Sunday, then I can, if I want to, I can say Hvordan var uka di? Or Hvordan var arbeidsuka di? Because then it's, well, depending on how you see it, the week is over. So that's an important thing to remember. Preteritum can only be used about things that are over, that are in the past. Whereas presens perfektum can also be used about things that started in the past. So the week started on Monday or Sunday, depending on how you see it. And it is still ongoing. So it is a past event, but it's also a present event, since it's ongoing. So when you go to your work on Monday, you might get the question, Hvordan har helga vært? How has the weekend been? And I know this might sound weird because the weekend is over. When you're Monday, the weekend is definitely over. But it's so close. And I think maybe we still want to hold on to it. We don't want to lose it. So, and it's Monday, right? It just ended. It's so close that it has lasted up until the moment you arrive at your work, right? It's still weekend until your workday starts on Monday. So that's the logic. But maybe on Tuesday, you wouldn't say Hvordan har helga vært? On Tuesday, you would say Hvordan var helga? How was the weekend? Because Tuesday, even though we want to hold on to it, I guess we just have to accept that it's over. It's been one day already. So yeah, you can find like sentences like that where like the use of preteritum and perfektum shows a little bit how people perceive time. When it comes to preteritum, even though we do not always precise when something happened, we often use it because we know that the other person knows what we're referring to. Right? If we're talking about when we went to school, for instance, we know when that was. We know that we didn't go to school when we were 30, most probably, right? So we have an idea. We have cultural references. We can imagine when it happened. And also because our focus is on the past. We're focusing on when that moment was. Reliving the past, remember? Imagine you talk to a colleague and you say, this weekend I might go on a cabin trip. Then, when your colleague meets you on Monday, even though the weekend is maybe not considered over yet, he or she might ask you, Hvordan var helga? Because then he or she is not referring to the whole weekend, but the cabin trip, the plan you had. So, and that is definitely over. So choosing preteritum over presens perfektum can also refer to something specific during the weekend or something specific during the day. Imagine, I'm meeting you on Wednesday after, Wednesday evening. And I know that you had some plans during the day that you were not stressed about. I can say, hvordan var dagen din? And then I'm not referring to the whole day. I'm referring to the things that you were talking about. Those specific things that are over. So, whereas if I say, hvordan har dagen din vært? Then it's more like in general, the whole day up until now. So because when you use preteritum, you are always talking about something that is over. Whereas presens perfektum does not have to be over yet. Okay, I hope that helps. Let me know what you think, and also let me know what you think about this on-the-go episode. Was the sound okay? I enjoyed it, at least. I've been walking around at this park and enjoying some fresh air, and I hope you have too. Takk for i dag. Vi høres.